You have probably never once questioned where your own last name actually came from. Most Black Americans grow up believing it came from the family that once enslaved theirs. The paperwork from 1865 tells a stranger story. Not always the enslaver's name, sometimes a name built entirely out of nothing, chosen on the spot in front of a stranger with a pen. In the first 2 years of freedom, government agents sat down with thousands of newly freed people and asked them, for the first time in their lives, one question no one had ever legally cared about. What is your name? Not your owner's name for you, yours. What they wrote down next still exists. It is sitting in an archive right now, and there is a real chance your own family's answer is somewhere inside it. 2 brothers, 1 plantation. 2 completely different choices when slavery ended, and only one of them kept anything close to the name he was given. So here is the actual claim. After emancipation, most formerly enslaved people did not simply keep wearing the surname of the person who had owned them. Stay with that for a second. You have probably heard the opposite, that every freed family just carried their enslaver's name forward because it was the only name on record. That version is close to a myth. Historians who have actually read the marriage and cohabitation registers from 1865 and 66 say the record shows something messier and far more deliberate than that. Some people did keep an enslaver's name, but when you look at why case by case, it is almost never simple obedience. Ask yourself what you would have written, given one chance to choose. March 3, 1865. Congress creates the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, the Freedmen's Bureau, to manage the transition out of slavery across the former Confederacy and to stand between and the men who refused to accept it. Bureau agents registered marriages that slavery had never legally recognized. Couples who had lived as husband and wife for 20 years with children were finally allowed to say so on paper. And on every single one of those forms, there was a blank line for a name. For millions of people, this was the first time in their entire lives that a government document existed with their name on it at all. Try to imagine reaching adulthood before that was ever true for you. Under slavery, your name was mostly for your enslaver's convenience. Freedom made it a legal fact for the first time. That is a bigger moment than it sounds. So why does the myth say everyone just kept the plantation name? Partly because it is the simplest explanation, partly because popular culture repeated it for a century. Genealogists who work directly with these registers report the opposite pattern more often than you would expect. Not universal, but common enough that it cannot be an accident. So today, 10 real, documented examples for you, not a guess. Names historians can point to in an actual record and explain exactly why that name was chosen. See how many of these sound like your own family story. Number 1, Freeman or Freedman, the single most direct answer on this entire list. No inherited name here at all, just a fact turned into a surname on purpose in front of the agent holding the pen. Imagine sitting at that table. After a lifetime with no legal name of your own, you get one sentence to declare who you are now. What would you have written? Number 2 and 3 come from the same family, which is exactly what makes them useful. 2 brothers, 1 enslaver, 2 completely different choices. This case survives because of a 1930s government project. Field workers for the Federal Writers Project traveled the South interviewing people who had lived through slavery while they were still alive to ask. Over 2,300 formerly enslaved people were interviewed between 1936 and 1938. Every transcript is sitting in the Library of Congress today, free to read in full. One of those Florida interviews describes a man named Robert Lee. During slavery, he had been called Robert Miller, the surname of the doctor who owned him, and every other person that doctor owned. When slavery ended, he did not keep Miller. He chose Lee, not his enslaver's name, not his own birth name if he ever had one recorded, a name he picked. Would you have kept the name of the man who owned you if freedom handed you one afternoon to pick something else instead? Number 3 sits right next to him in that same interview. His brother Aaron took a completely different name of his own, not Miller, and not Lee either. Same childhood, same enslaver, same day of freedom, more or less, and 2 brothers walked out with 2 different last names because the choice, for one brief moment, actually belonged to them. Number 4 breaks the myth even harder. A Freedmen's Bureau-era interview describes a father who took the surname not of his own enslaver, but of a completely different slaveholder on a different plantation that he had never even lived on. Genealogists call this a distancing choice. Sometimes the last name you carried into freedom was picked specifically to have nothing to do with the man who had just controlled your entire life. Think about how deliberate that is, not confusion, not convenience. A quiet, specific rejection written into a government form that clerk had no idea he was witnessing. Number 5 belongs to a woman named Jane Clark, who escaped slavery in 1859 and reached freedom by way of the Underground Railroad. She did not carry an enslaver's surname into her new life at all. She took the name Lemon, the surname of the person on the route who had helped her get there. A surname as a permanent thank you note. Every time anyone said her name for the rest of her life, they were naming the person who helped her survive. Number 6 is simpler and shows up again and again across different registers. A surname taken directly from a skill. Carpenter, mason, cooper, smith. Would you have picked the thing you were best at? Under slavery, your skilled trade could mean the difference between being sold away from your family or not. In freedom, wearing that same skill as your actual legal name was its own kind of statement. Look at your own job for a second. Could you imagine it as your surname? Number 7 is the honest complication in this whole video, and it deserves a full pause. Some freed people did keep an enslaver's surname, but not their last one, and not out of habit. Families had been sold apart for decades, scattered across counties and states. Keeping the surname from an earlier shared enslaver was sometimes the only working strategy left to find a sold-away parent, sibling, or child again after freedom. Not submission, a search tool. If your sister might still answer to that name somewhere in another state, you kept it too on purpose so freedom papers could eventually find each other. Number 8, the surname of a Union officer, often one connected to the United States colored troops, taken as a direct tribute by men who had served or whose freedom that officer had processed. For a formerly enslaved man who had just fought or watched his own liberation get signed into existence by a specific soldier, that name carried a debt worth wearing for the rest of his life. Who would you have named yourself after if one person had handed you your whole future? Number 9, a surname invented outright, no family history behind it at all. Just a word that sounded like the future they wanted, said out loud for the first time at that table. Justice, freedom itself sometimes as a literal surname. A blank slate is rare in any life. For one afternoon in 1865, thousands of people got exactly that. If you had one sentence to invent your own name from nothing, what word would you have reached for? Number 10 goes a step further than a surname. One formerly enslaved woman, born Isabella, walked away from her entire birth name as an adult and chose a new one to match the mission she had decided to carry. She became Sojourner Truth, not a name she was born with, not a name anyone gave her. A name she picked in full to describe exactly who she intended to be from that day forward. Read that list back. Freeman, lay, a stranger's surname chosen on purpose, a rescuer's name, a trade, an earlier owner's name kept as a search tool, an officer's name, an invented word, a whole new identity. How many of those sound like people just keeping what they were given? So here is what actually matters for your own family. These records are not locked away in a courthouse basement somewhere. Most of them are digitized, indexed, and free to search by name right now. Family Search holds the Freedmen's Bureau marriage registers, fully indexed, free. .com has county-by-county transcriptions. The National Archives holds the originals, and the Library of Congress holds every WPA interview, including the one about Robert Lee and his brother. Search your own family's surname in that Freedmen's Bureau marriage collection tonight, not a DNA kit. An actual signature from an actual year, possibly written by an actual ancestor's own hand. So which of these 10 reasons sits behind your own last name? A trade, a rescuer, a rejection of one man's name in favor of anyone else's, or the honest, deliberate choice to keep it so a scattered family could find its way back together? They didn't inherit the name, they wrote it themselves in their own hand the very first chance freedom ever gave them. Tell me in the comments which name you found and where it actually came from. And if paper trails like this one interest you, there's a lot more of this on the channel.